democracy is it expresses itself in all sorts of ways. And that includes people protesting. I've been the subject of protests during the course of my 8 years, and I suspect that there's not a president in our history that at some point hasn't been subject to these protests. So I would not advise people who feel strongly or are concerned about some of the issues that have been raised during the course of the campaign. I wouldn't advise them to be silent. What I would advise, what I advised before the election and what I will continue to advise after the election, is that elections matter, voting matters, organizing matters, being informed on the issues matter. And what I consistently say to young people, I say it in the United States, but I'll say it here in Germany and across Europe, do not take for granted our systems of government and our way of life. I think there is a tendency, because we have lived in an era that has been largely stable and peaceful, at least in advanced countries, where living standards have generally gone up, there is a tendency, I think, to assume that that's always the case. And it's not. Democracy is hard work. In the United States, if 43% of eligible voters do not vote, then democracy is weakened. If we are not serious about facts and what's true and what's not, and particularly in an age of social media where so many people are getting their information in sound bites and snippets off their phones, if we can't discriminate between serious arguments and propaganda, then we have problems. If people, whether they are conservative or liberal, left or right, are unwilling to compromise and engage in the democratic process and are taking absolutist views and demonizing opponents, then democracy will break down. And so I think my most important advice is to understand what are the foundations of a healthy democracy and how we have to engage in citizenship continuously, not just when something upsets us, not just when there's an election or when an issue pops up for a few weeks. It's hard work. And the good news is I think there are a lot of young people, certainly who were involved in my campaigns, and I think continue to be involved in work, not just politically, but through nonprofits and other organizations that can carry this hard work of democracy forward. But I do think sometimes there's complacency. Here in Europe, I think that there are a lot of young people who forget the issues that were at stake during the Cold War, who forget what it meant to have a wall. And I'll be honest, there have been times when I listened to the rhetoric in Europe where an easy equivalence somehow between the United States and Russia and between how our governments operate versus other governments operate, where those distinctions aren't made. I've said many times around the world that like any government, like any country, like any set of human institutions, we have our flaws. We've operated imperfectly. There are times when we've made mistakes. There are times where I've made mistakes or our administration hasn't always aligned ourselves with the values that we need to align ourselves with. It's a work of constant improvement. But I can say to the German people that the United States has been good for Germany, has looked out for Germany, has provided security for Germany, has helped to rebuild Germany and unify Germany. And I can say across Europe that many principles that have been taken for granted here around free speech and around civil liberties and an independent judiciary and fighting corruption. Those are principles that, not perfectly, but generally, we have tried to apply not just in our own country, but also with respect to our foreign policy. And that should be remembered, because at an age where there's so much active misinformation, and it's packaged very well, and it looks the same when you see it on a Facebook page or you turn on your television, where some over zealousness on the part of a U.S. official is equated with constant and severe repression elsewhere. If everything seems to be the same and no distinctions are made, then we won't know what to protect. We won't know what to fight for. And we can lose so much of what we've gained in terms of the kind of democratic freedoms and market-based economies and prosperity that we've come to take for granted. That was a long answer, wasn't it? I don't remember if there was a second part to it. I got all caught up in that one.
I asked you to advise